microphone.
And our goal is to educate retailers who are passionate about all the sports that they're in. Educate them on how to run a business and certain ways that you can save costs. We have a lot of associate members who are offering discounts to our members that can help you save money so you can stay in business and do the things that you love to do, turn people on to things that you're passionate about, and survive in business so you don't have to get a real job. So that's the whole goal. But anyway, you guys come on out here.
Test.
We got Doug Works, who's the Executive Director of Board Retailers Association. Bruce Cromartie, who owns BC Surf and Sport in several states, actually. And we got Paul Erickson, who is, I got his thing here, Director of Sales at Management One. They've been a good partner with us with Board Retailers. He's recognized as a retail educator in the areas of inventory, productivity, and control. And he's given seminars to retail groups throughout North and South America, Asia, and Europe. So by far and away the most educated guy on the panel. Here's Paul, otherwise known as Doug with the badge there.
Is this thing on? George, you read it just the way I wrote it, so that was awesome.
So, and then Doug, you would like to introduce our special guest.
Absolutely. Welcome. I'm the Executive Director for Board Retailers Association. We help you to increase margins, create more remarkable customer experiences, and lower your day-to-day costs. We do that mainly by having supporting vendor partners that help us to offset our cost and to allow us to do more in the way of programming for board specialty retailers. So I'd like to introduce Jesse from Podium to say a few words about Podium and what they're doing to help board specialty retailers.
Thanks, Doug. I feel like I need to walk down the runway a little bit, but I'm not going to do that.
You guys can all have a seat too as well.
So Podium, if you have not heard of Podium, what we do is we allow businesses to communicate with their customers on a platform that's easiest for them. So we consolidate any social media, anything that comes through text messaging into one platform. So if you have a widget on your website, we allow that to come through on a Podium side of things that would go into an inbox to where now you're able to communicate, send text message campaigns, and also be able to work with them in the platforms that are most comfortable for them. So if you're reaching out to people via Facebook, Instagram, and they're DMing you, now you have it consolidated into one platform to where you can actually just send them back a message through an inbox, regardless of theirs, and it looks like it's coming from the same spot. So let's say it's Facebook, you send me a message through Facebook, I get it, now I can reach out to you via Podium platform and be able to start that conversation. Our deal is we don't want you to leave the website and then they disappear forever. We want you to be able to retain that customer relationship and be able to evolve it so that way it turns into actual sales. And we'd be more than happy to show you a little bit more about what we do. We'll be hanging out around the show for the next couple of days. We'll be over at the booth for the Board Association. Lily here is more than happy to give you a demo if that's the case. So thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. So some of the topics of discussion we're going to do today starts with talking to certain key retailers, and Doug, although Executive Director of BRA, has also been in the retail end of it and the wholesale end of it. Paul, obviously an expert in retail management, and Bruce, of course, with stores in several states, is going to have a lot of information about operations and what's been happening lately. And the topics we want to talk about today, one of them is there's been a discussion of traffic decline in July. And I'm just going to start it off by saying that if you got open last year, they closed everybody down most of the year in 2020 for the summer. And if you got open, it was about this time of year, and then everything was exponential because nobody could shop at specialty retail for 3 or 4 months. So we actually did very good business once we reopened again. So we're going up against those numbers. So in talking to Bruce just earlier, he and I both compare our numbers to 2019 because 2020 was an anomaly. There was months we did 0 and we knew we weren't going to do 0 this year, but then there's months we did exponentially well, and we don't expect to reach those numbers. It would be nice, but we still take a look at whether or not we're up for 2019 or not. So first question to the panel would be, with supposed traffic declines in July, and concern about consumer confidence going into fourth quarter. What are some of the things that you think were going to happen fourth quarter? What are some of your predictions? And I'll ask Bruce first.
You know, I would say, George, we didn't see a decline in July. July and August were both very strong comps against 19 and solid against 20. I think personally that the products that we sell are not as heavily impacted by consumer confidence as a lot of things that show up in the numbers the government looks at, like cars and appliances and things like that. I think from what we're experiencing so far, it seems like a lot of the money that got pumped into the economy in the past year and a half is continuing to circulate, and I think is likely to keep driving solid sales. We certainly expect through the end of the year, and I think the spring looks, we're planning for a very solid spring next year as well.
Excellent, excellent. And Paul?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you look at the numbers, which is, in my opinion, so common, the news usually gets it wrong. The common narrative is what George said, that traffic was down in July, and July was a bad month, and we might be heading into at least a slowdown, if not a recession. And if you look a little closer at the numbers, auto sales were down 4% in July. That's a big chunk of retail sales. And auto sales were down simply because of inventory levels being very, very low. Clothing sales were down about 2.4% in July. But you have to remember that clothing sales were riding a crest of over 10% increases the prior 2 months. And so I think that was just a matter of July with clearance sales, not a lot of inventory again. There are reasons why we saw a downtick in July and even into the first part of August. And I'd also agree that I think fourth quarter is going to be stupendous. Overall, retail business has been very, very strong, really starting in March of this year. When the vaccinations started to happen and people were feeling more comfortable getting out, there was a tremendous amount of pent-up demand. But the statistics show that while the savings rate grew during the pandemic, we had $1.6 trillion in savings at the end of the pandemic in March of this year, which we didn't have in February of 2020, there's still a lot of that money sitting on the sidelines, ready to be spent. So at Management One, we're looking at data every day, and we see consumer spending continue to rise, retail sales continue to grow, and we think fourth quarter is going to be a very, very strong 3-month period.
I agree with that. Now, Doug, I know as the executive director of Board Retailers, you're more in touch day to day with all the retailers, most of the retailers within our organization. And what's the feeling that you get from them on their anticipation of fourth quarter?
I would definitely echo what Bruce and Paul said in terms of what will continue with the momentum, especially, fourth quarter is also your holiday season. And so there will definitely be a demand there, and as long as supply is there, then the demand will follow. So it's a situation where we're in good shape from that perspective. We're very fortunate to have had additional participation numbers, of course, that grew from the pandemic. A lot of people that were in traditional bat and ball sports decided they weren't going to just couch it. They were active, and they decided to take surfing lessons and get into skateboarding and that kind of thing. And so the overall participation numbers have increased, and some of those are one-time purchase type situations where they just buy a single surfboard or a single skateboard setup, and then they're kind of one and done for a little while. But then others will be repeat business and repeat participants where they're going to continue to be a lifelong customer for some of these shops around the country, for sure.
Well, that's good. And I know at Modern Skate and Surf, I'm from Michigan, been doing this a long time. We've had pretty good sell-through this year too, but one of the problems that I have is actually getting product in to sell. So what that's helped us out with is we've been able to maintain margins, not running very many sales at all these days, because if we got it, we sell it at this point. And it's a nice situation to be in, but it's not going to be that way forever, because supply chain's been affected. certainly a lot worse last year than this year, but like it's starting to get a little bit better, but there's still gonna be some shortages probably for holiday they're talking about. And I'm not talking about just chips for the F-150. Just in all product levels, the supply chain and the delivery chain has been affected. So I'd like to ask Bruce if you've seen some issues with getting supply in the store, and has it affected your margins because you've been able to keep them up because you can't get stuff in?
We've definitely seen a lot of issues as far as getting things into the store. It's more to do with, I think, consistent, smooth flow of product has been impossible to depend on at this point. But that being said, the demand has been so strong that it's tended to fill a lot of the voids that would be there otherwise, because if product from one company isn't in place, but you have other companies that have that category covered, people are adjusting to what's available to them and still making a purchase. So I think on that, the product flow situation, I think we've got a long time to go before that all smooths out based on what everybody's talking about in terms of port issues and still manufacturing problems overseas and that kind of thing. But that being said, it seems so far like that a lot of that goes out in the wash as far as people being willing to adjust to availability of specific things being covered by other items. I think what I was going to say margin-wise, I think we all have benefited by the fact that we haven't had to mark as much stuff down. I think hand in hand with that, over the long run, we're also going to benefit by the fact that some product that would have gotten stale on your racks has been sold. It's been sold at full price, but also it's gone. So 3 months, 6 months from now, you're not going to be marking that product down. You've already sold it and replaced it with something more current. So I think there's a way to go before I feel like we're going to be terribly concerned about markdowns, because what's coming in is still very much in demand, and at the same time, there isn't a lot of stuff piling up that's going to be needing a push later.
And then, Paul, do you think, using your crystal ball, looking into the future, do you think that everything's got its ebb and flow, and right now we're in kind of a good spot, especially if you can get product in there? I was telling everybody that one of my managers, his whole job is to buy product, and make sure you get product in here, and that there's a lot of personal activity going into getting product, and I've always said this whole industry is about relationships, and if you have a good relationship with a vendor, you can probably pry some extra product out of them if you can, so you try to do the best you can with that. But do you feel that maybe once the ebb slows down and the flow starts coming, are we going to get to a point maybe next summer or next spring where all of a sudden in our industry in particular, are we going to be overstocked and oversaturated where all of a sudden everybody's going to have too much stuff?
That, George, is a really good question. And that's something we are concerned about at Management One. Right now, the biggest concern we have is the supply chain, quite frankly. Last week in Vietnam, all the factories were shut down and are still shut down. And when you consider that when the tariffs were put on China a few years ago, a lot of that business went to Southeast Asia. And COVID-19 and the Delta variant is running rampant in Southeast Asia right now. And Vietnam has become an important source of product in the United States. 50% of all apparel right now in the United States is sourced out of Vietnam, 20% of all footwear. So for those factories being shut down, unfortunately, I think the one problem that's going to stay with us for a while is the supply chain. And I'm kind of old school. I think I've got you, George, by a few years on age, by the way, on this panel, just so you know. I believe in an old rule of getting merchandise, which is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I've known a lot of retailers that were the most obnoxious retailers on planet Earth when it came to calling vendors and asking where their merchandise was. I'll tell you can I tell a quick story? Okay, this is what they were worried about me monopolizing the panel. It's happening right in front of you right now. But many years ago, I was a rep for a shoe company, and I was in my 20s, and they brought me into the home headquarters, and this was before computers even, that's how old I am. And they were showing me some of my customers. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and one of my big customers was the Dayton's department stores, and they pulled up Dayton's file for their shipping, and it had a big green sticker on it. And I said, what's the green sticker for? And they go, oh, Dayton's is very, very important for us. They're our key customer around the country. When their merchandise comes in, it goes out right away. We don't waste any time. So then they showed me a pretty good customer I had in Rochester, Minnesota, bought a lot of merchandise from me, grade A credit, and had an amber sticker on it. And I said, what's the amber sticker for? And they said, well, the amber sticker is, these are, by the way, Minnesotans, you people are so nice, Minnesota nice. These people never complain. We can ship them late. We know we can get away with it. So we put them on the side, because they won't really bother us. And then there was a little store I sold in St. Peter, Minnesota. Hardly bought maybe $2,000 worth of merchandise a year from me. And they had a green sticker on it. I go, why do these people have a green sticker? He goes, this guy's the biggest pain in the patoot that we ever have. He's calling us all the time, complaining where the merchandise is. And just so we don't have to deal with him, we get his merchandise out first. And that was, ladies and gentlemen, my first lesson in the greasy wheel gets, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And it still works today. When supply chain are problems, don't be afraid to call, bug them, ask them where your merchandise is, call your reps, call the company itself, and be a squeaky wheel, because that sometimes can really help you get merchandise at a time when supply is difficult.
That's great advice. As I was talking, with this business being about relationships and nurturing and building those relationships so you have a personal contact with somebody in-house and you can squeeze a little bit more out of them when you can. And I never feel that I can complain too much to somebody. They might feel I am, but if I got something to say, I got something to say, and hopefully they respect me enough that I'm not going to overdo it. But that's a great point. Doug?
And also, squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you're not making progress with your vendors and your brands that, you feel that you're being underserved or they're taking advantage of you or not giving you that green sticker, then let us know. Board Retailers Association is your voice. We can communicate with brands and vendors in a way that can actually make some progress in a lot of cases. So do utilize us, opt into the free membership and allow us to be your voice.
Yeah, that's good. For those of you that don't know, Board Retailers Association started in 2003, and basically we have over 3,000 doors of independent retailers nationwide that participate, and we do have a free membership plus a distinguished membership for only $100 a year, which saves you on shipping and all sorts of discounts and stuff. But our goal is to educate retailers, as I was saying earlier, to become more successful. And if you can, I tell everybody I probably wasted enough money to pay for 3 college educations living and learning when I started my own business. So what we try to do is educate people. They may be passionate about the sports they're in, but we try to educate you on certain ways to run your business. During the whole COVID pandemic, we had a whole section on how to renegotiate your lease, how to talk to your landlord, whether should you get EIDL, should you get PPP, a lot of educational things that with all the links on where to go and weed out all the crap so you can get to things easier. And that's why if you communicate with us with what you need, we can help you get there. And so that's what Board Retailers is about, is helping the independent retailer. And when we do that, we help the manufacturers by communicating with independent retailers so that they can be more efficient as well. So, and getting back to this whole COVID thing and how it's kind of affected us as retailers, I know one of the big issues has been staffing. Everybody's getting all this free money from the government, and Walmart's paying $15 an hour, and somebody giving out free college education or something, but and independent guys can't really do all that. But so my question is, I've been very lucky with the staff that I have. They're passionate about the sports I'm in. They believe hopefully in me and what I want to accomplish with Modern Skate and Surf. But a lot of people are having trouble getting qualified staff in that really care about the business, who are willing to work, and and again, it's not auto company money or union money or whatever, but it's a fulfilling job. And I was wondering, for Bruce, you're in several different states, so you've got a couple different economies to deal with. Do you have issues with staffing, getting qualified people, keeping them, and keeping your stores staffed adequately to handle this increased business?
Yeah, we've had difficulty staffing everywhere. I would say certainly COVID has made it a lot worse. Our business is concentrated primarily in Florida and Colorado. Florida, we've seen an impact here more in terms of part-time help. Like our long-term, full-time people, staffing has stayed very stable, but part-time help where you sort of fill in parts of the schedule, it's been tough to find people that have been interested in getting a new job this past year plus. Out west, it's a different story because it's been a number of years, really, in Colorado since weed was legalized. It's been tough to hire people in Colorado because that drove labor prices up a ton. $15 an hour is just basic minimum starting wage at any place. At McDonald's drive-through windows, $15 to $18 an hour.
That's one thing a comment I want to make on this whole business about making a national minimum wage. I once had a manager that said, and again, I'm from Michigan. He says, I can make 25 grand more a year working in San Francisco. And I said, yeah, but it'll cost you 50 grand more a year to live there. So it's an economies of scale. Like you said, if you're in New York City or you're in LA or San Francisco, it's a higher cost of living, so you need to make more money. Luckily, Midwest is not as expensive to live, so it doesn't necessarily jibe that you should have that high of a wage because it's not as expensive to live in. Now, I don't know if you got any comments on that, Paul, about wages and different, you've been all over the world actually, so maybe different parts of the world, there's different scales of economy. Like if I look on TV and I see somebody at the equator that's living in a tent and they got no shoes on and shorts and that poor person, I'm like, that's where I want to be. I want to be barefoot on the beach in a tent somewhere at the equator. I mean, it's not necessarily as bad as it may seem. So,
well, I'm also in Big Ten country. Also, George, I'm Minnesota, and here's some facts. I think what Bruce said is really, really important. The $15 has now become the de facto minimum wage in this country. I really do believe that, and I think also, George, it has been in San Francisco and in Manhattan. $15 an hour has been the de facto minimum wage for decades because of the cost of living. But you're going to see that now, where you're to get people you want. It starts exactly what Bruce said at $15 an hour, and we may have to start talking about benefits on top of that. We have an inflationary cycle right now. George, you were mentioning about shipping costs going up into the store. They're going up dramatically. Our prices are going to have to keep up with that. And I know one of the things that we want to talk about on the panel is how to look at getting a little more margin in our business so that we can pay for some of these costs that we are going to incur. The first thing I would say, though, about hiring good people is ask yourself a question, everybody here that has a store: would you want to work for yourself? I mean, would you look at what you're offering someone and would you take that job? There are some really successful, we have a client in Texas, they have 9 stores, and the owner of the stores has a very interesting perspective of how he gets good people. When you walk into his offices, he's got shuffleboards and he's got ping pong tables, and it's almost like you went into Google in San Francisco, right? Where they get good people because of the atmosphere and the environment they create in that business. And that's exactly what our client in Texas does. And he really doesn't have a problem finding people. The other thing he does that I think is he zigs when people zag. And what I mean by that when you attract people is that they ask him, what are my vacation benefits? And he tells them, we don't have any. And they say, wait a minute, I don't get any time off for vacation? He goes, no, you take off as many days or weeks as you want to. Now that may seem insane, but when that policy is instituted, we have the same policy, by the way, at Management One. And when you institute a policy of openness in terms of, say, vacation or sick leave, what you'll find is people don't take as much vacation or sick leave. That's actually a weird kind of comment about human psychology. But it makes for an attractive job offering where you want to have an environment where people want to work for you. And this, by the way, everybody, just so you know, I've been to the auto parts dealership conventions. This is a much more sexier industry to work at than a lot of the industries that we work with at Management One. So you guys just think a little bit differently outside of the box. Now, I know we're going to talk a little bit about, and I have some comments about getting more margin and how do we get more markup that I'd like to talk about, but I'm going to turn it back to you, George. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, so we were going to roll into that, like we were talking about competitive pricing strategies and margins, and we touched on it a little bit that, you know, because of the fact of supply and demand that generally speaking, you can maintain margins and not put things on sale because you pretty much sell everything you got, or if you don't have that particular brand, as Bruce was saying, you'll buy a similar brand and be happy with that. So the question on the table is, how long is this going to last? Now, I know there's a lot of discussion about inflation these days, and oh my God, inflation, and some of it had to do with tariffs. I know, like protective gear that we have at Modern, it used to be $60, it's now 100. Well, there's 25% tariff increase, and if you increase the wholesale margin by 25%, retail goes up 30%. And so next thing you know, it's 90, 100 bucks for a pair of knee pads that used to be 60. So I've seen that directly in my store. People are still buying them. Now, how long will that last? I don't know. And not running out, running out of product allows you to say, I can't really discount that because right now I'm going to sell everything I got on the wall in the next couple of days probably. So to Bruce, maybe how long do you think this level of confidence is going to last, and is there going to be a point in time when it becomes more competitive? I know you touched on it earlier that we're in for the long haul through holiday for sure, maybe into spring, but do you see somewhere in the future possibly that that margins might wane and you might have to start putting some things on sale?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question things are going to cycle. They're always, when they're down, they're always going to go up, and when they're up, they're always going to work their way down at some point. So no doubt. I do think though that there's a lot of unknowns as far as after the Delta variant, there might be another variant that comes along that changes everything we're all dealing with. But assuming that what we're seeing right now is sort of what we can expect going forward and work our way out of the Delta situation right now, I feel like very comfortable going through spring, potentially into next summer. I think from that point, it's nothing but guesswork anyway. It's like we've never, and I don't think this is a bad idea, but we've never done anything with a 5-year plan for the business, because my attitude with that is, show me the guy that had a 5-year plan 5 years ago. Let's lay it on the table and you show me what he was right about. It's you can't see the future, and they're going to. Last 2 years have taught us how crazy things can be compared to anything we would have ever foreseen happening. I think the bottom line is I feel real comfortable with where things are at right now, and I feel like everybody that's here that's in business for themselves, if they've been at it for a while, they've experienced the need to adjust to changing situations, and we just have to keep our eyes open and watch for things that redirect some of our approach.
Yeah, that's very good. Like, everything is very volatile nowadays. I know back in 2008, I put a big investment in a new building and put a lot of stuff into it, not knowing that the next thing, I thought it was like the early 90s and we were just about ready to hit our stride and be really good for a few years. And then 2008 came along and almost took me out. And so we have learned being in business that things are very volatile, and that you got to go with the flow. And like you said, you almost can't plan 5 years out. It's more like 5 months out if you're lucky to hope that you got it right, you know. And I know Paul's got the crystal ball, and he kind of knows everything that's going to happen. But you might have a comment on the future as far as maintaining those margins and how to do that, and how to be cautious not to run into overstock.
Yeah, and actually, George, you asked me that question earlier, and I never really addressed it, I don't think. I think there's maybe a tendency right now that we might get overstocked. In other words, we've got a supply chain problem. We're tending to overbuy, squeaky wheel, all of that. But the one thing that I think we all learned from the pandemic is that we possibly didn't need as much inventory that we used to stock to do the same sales. And it comes down to the fact that if we learn from that, we're going to understand that as we leave the pandemic, and even when things start to even out more now, what we, I think, need to know is that we need to keep that inventory rotating in and out of our stores quickly. At Management One, we think in this business we should be every 8 to 10 weeks, that you're always rotating inventory in and out. And that is going to do a world of good in terms of helping margins, by the way, because most markdowns that you take in your business are done not because you bought the wrong things, but because you bought too much things. You bought too much inventory and had too much left over at the end of the season to discount. If you can start rotating inventory out in and out quickly through better planning, through better markdown strategies, being maybe a little more narrow and deeper on inventory positions, then your markdown situation is going to be solved. You're always going to have markdowns. But what I do want to talk about, if I may, is initial markup, because I do believe that, as we said before, and as Bruce said too, this $15 thing, this is now the new base, and we're only going to go up from there in terms of payroll. Payroll for most retailers of your expenses that's a quarter of your overhead is payroll alone. That's more than half of your overhead. So to control your overhead, as your payroll goes up, so will your overhead. And so looking at IMU a little bit differently, here's what I'm talking about. I think for too often we just kind of mark things up. It was an old habit in the business that we mark things up based on a ratio. I get 2.2 or I get 2.3, and back when I was young we used to have a markup wheel that we used. And I think really smart retailers right now are understanding that wherever we can get more initial markup, we should. Sometimes it's the small things in retail that really count. And so small things like maybe putting cents at the end of your prices, like 50 cents. So it's not $29, it's $29.50. It's completely invisible to the customer. But you might look at how many SKUs you sell over the course of a year, and that 50 cents might mean something. A quick story on that. I know I'm monopolizing right now. Sorry, Bruce. But I live in Minneapolis. I fly a lot in Delta Airlines. Several years ago, I was looking at my receipts for Delta Airlines, and I noticed every ticket I bought had 20 cents on it. And I thought, that never prevented me from buying a ticket on Delta, right? And I'm thinking on planet Earth, no one ever did not buy a ticket on Delta Airlines because there was 20 cents attached to it. So I thought, I wonder what 20 cents is to Delta Airlines. I looked up how many tickets they sold that year. It was 150 million tickets. So I'm assuming I wasn't the only person they were charging the 20 cents to. 20 cents on 150 million, quick math, is $30 million Delta put on their bottom line with no tarnished image, no loss of business, nothing. In fact, it was free money. So sometimes little things can get you higher IMU. And one last thing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to George. When you're at a trade show, and you're at this trade show, and you're buying from a company that you know is not going to be competitively shopped by your customer, it's usually tchotchkes, little items, right? And it's something new that's not found online, it's not found in your competitor's store. Generally, you like it, you look at the tchotchke and you go, I don't know, Bruce, do you like this? Bruce is my partner, he said, I like it. The next thing you do is you ask the salesman how much it is. And that's where we hurt our markup. Because before we ask the cost of the price, Bruce and I as partners should decide what can we sell it for in our store. We're retailers, what's the intrinsic value? And let's say we looked at it and we thought, you know what, we could sell it for $49.50. They say, okay, $49, it would sell for $49.50. Now we ask the salesman how much it was, and he says it's $9. Well, if we knew it was $9, we'd mark it to $29.50, and we thought we were getting away with it, right? So sometimes don't let the cost gravity of stuff that you buy pull your markup in. Look, there has been studies made from customers who think you all make 80% markup on your goods. I say every now and then let's prove them right and get a little more margin. But you have to think outside the box a little bit on markup. And if you do, That will help pay for the increased payroll costs that Bruce was talking about, the increased shipping costs that George and Doug were talking about. All those costs are going up. We've got to react to it. We've got to find a way to increase that margin so we can pay for it and still be profitable. I'm done.
That's some really good points. You know, for example, like if you're using the regular 40-point markup or 50-point markup, we usually add $1 to it, so it's like 40 points plus $1, and the $1 is supposed to go towards shipping. So you get 20 items in, you put it, you know, instead of $25, it's $25.99. Let's say you pay $12.50 for it. So double your money markup on clothing, $25. You put it at $25.99. That $1 helps pay for all the shipping, the guy that unpacked it, the guy that tagged it, and all the rest of that all adds up. So even that small amount is that, and I know Mike from ZJ Boarding House out in Santa Monica years ago talked about, he was at whatever 95 cents, and he figured out they ended up putting it up to 99 cents, and they made like an extra 20 grand that year just on the 4 cents on everything in his store that he sold that year. So every penny counts in this day and age, and it's about don't be afraid to charge the customers. One thing I tell my employees is don't feel sad for the customer because he's spending money. They took the time to drive into your store. They took the time to look at stuff. You gave them expert advice. You gave them a good product in a good place to look for it with the proper information. You've done your job. You deserve to make money off that product. And so don't be afraid of making margins on things that are worth more than just a regular 40-point markup or 50-point markup, depending on the category. And that's a good point that Paul was making. Just don't be afraid to earn the money that you earn, so to speak. So, and then segueing into just another topic. You know, since we're Board Retailers Association, and our goal is to help independent retailers, and we work directly with manufacturers, and I always say that we didn't, you know, forgive my French, but we don't want to make it a bitch session with the manufacturers and say, you got to give us all this stuff. No, we need to understand that manufacturers have the same problems that we have. They compete against other people. They have to decide a year in advance how much of something's going to sell, and they need to make that. They need to know what color it's going to be. They need to, you know, try to decide. So we try to help them as retailers decide by communicating what the customers are looking for. They obviously have all the brainiacs to make the projections a year or two down the road, and hopefully they hit it right, and hopefully we buy the right things from them that sell in our store, and we're lucky enough to have those options. But they still have the same struggles. They compete against other people. They got to pay for shipping. They got to pay designers and people. So I'll use my great example that you guys have all heard before. It's not how much money you make, it's how much you make on what you sell that allows you to stay in business. And I used Herman's World of Sporting Goods, who in 1993 did $330 million in sales the year they closed because they couldn't pay their bills. Now, who wouldn't want to do $300 million in sales? But they couldn't pay their bills because they had their overhead was too much, and they had overextended themselves, and things were in a downward spiral. So it's not how much you take in, it's how much you make and what you take in that allows you to stay in business. And margin's the key, which is something that we've been talking about. So again, Board Retailers is here to help you with a lot of those topics. And if you talk to our executive director, Doug, you go to our webpage, Board Retailers Association, boardretailers.org. It's the Board Retailers Association if you look that up online. And there's a lot of relevant articles on how to run a business, what's going on in the industry, those kinds of things that'll help you make some decisions in your life. And then we have a lot of associate partners like Management One that help us with providing information to you that makes it easier for you to make money. And we also have people that offer discounts in insurance, freight, different ideas about negotiating leases. We got direct to manufacturer, web development people, things like that. So check out boardretailers.org. And then just to segue into one of our final questions here would be, you know, as board retailers, a little bit off the topic of what we've been before, what can manufacturers or brands do for retailers to improve your business? And I would put that to Bruce at first to see if you have any ideas. I know things have been fair these days, you know, as far as the sell-through and all that. But is there something in your mind that might come to mind that brands could do better to help retailers out?
You know, I think the answer to that really, George, is probably different for every retailer with every brand they deal with. So it's hard to give you a generalized answer. I think overall, I feel like the support we get from the brands that we deal with here and those that aren't here is something that makes a big difference in our success and has been really important. And I don't see that becoming less of a factor. I think the brands in general do a good job of supporting us as a retailer. I can't speak for everybody, but I think in general they tend to do a good job. And I think we're living in a world where the internet has made it possible for most of these brands. It used to be 20, 25 years ago, you would have one brand that was really good at board shorts and maybe their screen prints weren't that great, or you'd have somebody that each brand would sort of have their niche most of the time where they had a strength and then they might do other categories that were not so important with that brand. These days, every one of these companies is able to find the right source for the best fabrics, the best production and that kind of thing. And by the same token, I think they've all elevated their game in terms of support for retail, POP, and as well as social media and that side of things. So I think there's always something that can be better, but I think in general it'd be hard for me to say that they don't already do a good job.
No, that's good. And what you see with Bruce, he's nurtured these relationships over time, and that's really helped him out by being able to say that he has created these relationships with his vendors who now they're happy to take care of him, you know. And there's things you can do as retailers to help nurture that relationship. Number one, pay your bill on time. Number two, communicate with them if you have overstock on how you can get rid of it. Maybe send some things back, and those find out what, you know, don't get mad at them if they won't take it back. You know, just say, okay, I got to find another alternative. Follow their rules. Not, you know, if they say don't sell on Amazon, don't. You know, if they say don't sell for less than minimum advertised price, don't. And then you build this relationship with your manufacturer so that you know, you have these kind of relationships where they do take care of you, and you have these good experiences. And then also too, one thing I've said about the internet is, you know, everybody talks about, oh geez, I got to compete against the big guys that got a bunch of people that are working their website and everything like that. It's not so much just competing against other websites. It's competing against what the internet has done is it allows manufacturers, like Bruce was saying, to be more dialed into what's hot. Like, you'll find things that are hot items, and they'll get knocked off and be at the department store. Looks just like what we got, that's the cool brand. It'll be in the department store the next month. They're able to react a lot quicker. So that's something that the internet has done, is it used to be you get a hot item and it'd be under the radar for like 3 years, and then it was 2 years, then it was 1 year, now it's like a couple of months, you know. And if something's hot, it's knocked off and it's everywhere else, you know. I use the example, not scooters this time around, but scooters about 15 years ago. I had a former manager call me up. He said, dude, you got to carry scooters. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. And no, the bike shops in California are selling by the truckload. No, I'm not doing it. And then finally I got them. And within 2 months, you could get them at Bed Bath & Beyond, 7-Eleven, and every kiosk in the mall. And they were all selling for $5 more than I bought them for. But it only took a couple months for that to happen, and that's the beginning of when all the knockoff stuff was happening. And it also allows the good manufacturers to be able to provide a better product to us. So, but Paul, I'd say, you know, in case you got some input on that topic at all.
Well, I'm going to agree with what Bruce said. This is not a one-size-fits-all, I think, what Bruce was saying. I think that's really true. You know, look, the vendors, the manufacturers, they're our partners, and they should act like our partners. I do think one thing that I would like to see more of, however, is more collateral point of purchase on your sales floor information that they can provide us. The customer wants to know about the products they look at, and the more we can tell them good information about what they're looking at, the better that we're able to sell that product. And a lot of that can come from the manufacturer itself. A lot of it can come from you. A simple things as if you just got something in. I know it sounds hokey, but tell them just arrived. They don't know, it's just but human beings gravitate towards newness. That's why people sleep overnight at an Apple store before the new Apple 12 comes out. That looks exactly like the Apple 11, by the way. Phone, there's no difference, but we are gravitated in our brains to newness. And so when we have newness in the store, tell them about it. It's simple like, you know, I knew this one store where I walked through the store and it said Molly's Pick on several areas. They said Molly's Pick, you know. And so I asked the owner, I go, is Molly your manager? And he goes, no, Molly worked here 10 years ago, but I don't know where she is now. Molly didn't even exist, but the fact that he would put that on his sales floor on merchandise to people grab, we're all underconfident. And the customer's underconfident. We want to be told why this is good for us. And so getting back to the manufacturers, the more they can give us that kind of on-the-floor collateral point of purchase information, good information about their products that we can tell to our customers, I think that would be a big, big boost to help sell their product.
I would definitely echo that, Paul. I think that makes a lot of sense. Ask more from your vendors in terms of help me sell this, help me create a buzz, help me make it remarkable. I do a lot of reading, and I read a lot of Seth Godin's work. Seth is a marketing author, and he says, if you're not remarkable, you're invisible. If you're not remarkable, you're invisible. Are you including that? Are you showing that on your Instagram and your Facebook? And what you're conveying, are you promoting your new products just with a stagnant image? Or are you actually using a video to showcase all that newness to get your customers excited about it? So think about things along those lines to create that remarkable nature, to showcase what's new. You can have all the new product in the world, but if you don't convey to your customers that it's new and it's fresh, check it out, then if you're not remarkable, you're invisible.
So with that, we're going to have a couple minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions in the audience whatsoever? Or have we fully educated you on the retail environment in 2021? Any questions by anybody out there? Well, we appreciate you guys coming by. Again, you check out the Board Retailer booth, and be happy to help you guys out.
We have a retailer gathering happening at 4:30 over in the neighborhood over here, so do join us for that. Come by our booth anytime over the next 3 days.
Free beer.
968. We'll look forward to seeing you. Every one of you can opt into free Board Retailers Association membership. You can do that by going to boardretailers.org and just click on the join form. We also have physical join forms at our booth, and we'll look forward to meeting you and helping you out.
Thank you very much.